welcome back to the class, everyone. With the introduction of Snap last week and some of the comments in his kit reveal, it's fairly clear that we are going to be getting some more Phantom Menace content, and I would love for a portion of that content to be in the form of characters. So I took the liberty and really the sacrifice of watching the Phantom Menace again, which, was very difficult for me. It's not like it's my favorite Star Wars movie of all time and, impacted very much my childhood and my overall love for Star Wars. And within that watch, I found 15 characters that would be really cool for us to have in game. So before we get into those 15 characters and what I would like to see from them, before we start the video, I do want to give a little bit of a shout out to my brother. He is starting to post a lot of his comedy to YouTube. I will go ahead and leave a link in the description to that. And if you guys could check it out, have a few laughs, like, subscribe, comment, do all the good stuff, you know the drill. I would appreciate that very much. But coming into the actual topic here of the characters we want from the Phantom Menace, I felt that it would be a little important to talk about the characters that we do have that really represent the movie as it is, and my goodness, it is bad. We have almost no representation for the Phantom Menace. The amount of characters on the light side that really represent it is pretty much just Qui-Gon Jinn. I guess we have characters like Grandmaster Yoda and Mace that technically did exist, but they didn't really do anything as far as combat goes, and most of their moves are based off of other places in lore, or maybe even just from episode 2 where they have a lot more fight scenes. So I think there's a lot of additions that can be made here, and we'll definitely get into that in depth. And then even on the dark side, we have some pretty important separatists. The B-1 battle droids obviously were a critical point and everything. The droidicas had a pretty big part, Darth Maul as well. But I still think there's more that can be done from that regard. So without further ado, I think the character that I want the most from the Phantom Menace is a very clear win of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And this is going to be a very weird transition if we do get the character, because I can't really remember where we got a version of a character that was definitely weaker as far as general strength terms goes of a character that we already have in game. Now, we did take kind of a step down from old Ben to Jedi Master Kenobi, and while he was younger and more inexperienced, Jedi Master Kenobi was arguably the higher prime of Obi-Wan. We haven't really had this transition back into Padawan. So I'm not saying he needs to be as good as JMK or even GK or old Ben, but it would be really cool to get this character in game, and he could be used in a few places. They could obviously slot him into the Qui-Gon Jinn lead, give him some very direct synergy in there, maybe in GAC or maybe a different Omicron that could give him viability in another game mode, or they could just kind of move him into what we're gonna call the Naboo company team, which we'll explore further with some other characters. But yeah, there are a lot of fun mechanics that can put into him. I always thought it would be great before we even had the Qui-Gon Jinn Omicron, if he could be in there, and if you kill Qui-Gon Jinn, he would absorb all the stats and have some anti-Sith synergy. That none of that really seems necessary because of the Omicron and a lot of the other things that are going on. Next up, who I think would be really cool would actually be to get both Queen Amidala, another version of Padme, as well as Sabe, one of her decoys that was very prevalent in the Phantom Menace, and there were a ton of interactions back and forth between the two of them. And this is, I think, is a really cool design space that CG could use, having one consistently taunt and stealth, and you never really know which one is which. And maybe they could even incorporate that in there in some way, maybe even with the health and protection bars, so they could swap spots and you don't really know who you're attacking. And just to add some more complexity to overall what the team is doing, Amidala would obviously have the leadership ability overall because she is actually the queen. But this concept of a decoy is something that Padme uses pretty consistently throughout the Star Wars lore, and we don't really have anything to mirror that in game as of yet with the one variation we have. In addition to those two characters, we could also get the Handmaidens, probably just one of them to kind of represent everyone overall. We could either get the version we see in the Phantom Menace with the orange-red garbs, but we could also get the variation that we see that go against Vader when they're trying to defend Padme's grave, as can be seen from this comic here that we currently have on screen. I would be fine with either, but again, it's another dynamic that could kind of work into that Amidala squad where you have the decoy and her jumping back and forth what they're doing, while the Handmaidens cause plenty of issues because they are obviously very much combat trained. Another character that would obviously fit super well into that squad, functioning probably more as the tank or the dedicated tank, would be Captain Panaka, who does serve as the bodyguard. They could also make him a very powerful attacking tank. that whenever anyone on the rest of the team takes damage, he will continually stack his offense or something like that and eventually punish you for not going after him. Maybe he wouldn't even need taunt because of that, because it would create a similar interaction to that of either B2 or Leia, where just because the tank isn't taunting doesn't mean that you're not being punished by not immediately going after them. So that would be kind of the first team that we would want to look at from the Phantom Menace, being kind of this Naboo company, focusing mostly on humans. Obi-Wan could either be fit into that, or he could fit into the Jedi team, or maybe they could just do Padme as well as Captain Panaka, and maybe throw in some Gungans to complete it again as more of a Naboo faction. Now, taking a little bit of a break from the light side characters, two other characters that I think would be very interesting to see in the game would be Sebulba and Watto. And the interaction that I want to see here is Watto his whole kit design is based off of taking bets on Sebulba, and the better Sebulba does, the better or the more Watto is going to take advantage of it. So let's say that Sebulba doesn't take any damage for the entire turn. That way, Watto will end up gaining 20 flat speed at the end of every turn that he does that. Or let's say Sebulba gains 10 buffs over a certain amount of period of time. Now, Watto is going to inflict 5 debuffs across the team randomly or something like that. Any way that Sebulba is gaining the advantage, Watto is getting, his bets are going higher, he's getting more rewards off of this, and it is punishing the enemy team because he has taken greater advantage of that. Maybe he could even steal stats away from the enemy team in the same way that he was going to steal the ship away from our good friend Qui-Gon. Obviously, they would be Scoundrels and Darkside. As to what team they would go on, I'm not really sure, but I'm kind of picturing a similar interaction to that of Queel and IG-11, where you can throw them around on a few different Scoundrel squads, and they always just kind of seem to work regardless of where you put them, as long as they have that overall Scoundrel synergy. And now, we are going to be talking about the character that everybody knew I was going to talk about because I talk about him 900 times a day, and that is going to be Jar Jar. Jar Jar obviously would be able to fit into the previous squad we talked about for Naboo Company if it was not filled out with some of those lesser known characters like the Handmaidens or Sabe, but he could also fit into a Gungan team himself. I can't really see him being the leader for obvious reasons, but I think there's a lot of ground here that they could work with in getting him the confusion debuff that 3PO currently uses. It would be great for him. I would also like to see him be somewhat of an evasion tank, where he would be kind of used as a distraction, wave his arms, stick his tongue out, do all the things that he does. But when you actually have to go after him, he's actually fairly agile. So very similar to the mechanic Chopper currently has in game, where I think he gains taunt for 1 turn, his evasion goes up by 30. Something a little bit more extreme than that, and maybe a little bit stickier than that as well. Next up will be Boss Nass as well as Captain Tarpals. Obviously wanting to fill out that Gungan team. They both kind of have leader abilities going on, so maybe one of them focusing more on the 3v3 side of GAC or the 5v5 side of GAC, or GAC and TW, giving both of them a little bit of a light to shine based off their leaderships. As to what they actually do, I really can't think of that much at all. I've mostly just been designing Jar Jar's kit in my head for, the last couple of years, and they haven't had much space to go in there. And if we're really just wanting to complete the Gungan team, there aren't really any more named Gungans that I'm aware of from the Phantom Menace. We could breach into the Clone Wars, where we would get Boss Leone and a few other characters like that. But if we really just want to fill it up with Phantom Menace characters for the sake of filling it up with Phantom Menace characters, we could easily take, Spear Gungan and Shield Gungan or something like that, just to fill it up, have another tank in there to coincide with Jar Jar to help protect Boss Nass, and then the warrior could be your high, damage dealing NPC, or not NPC, but character of the average team, very similar to the Tusken Warrior kind of design that we're going for there. Now, we've talked about the Naboo Company, we've talked about the Gungans, we've talked about our dark side Scoundrels. One of the things that was specifically mentioned in the post about getting more Phantom Menace content, or really Naboo content, was the fact that there's going to be an upcoming event. This highly implies either a legendary or a raid or TB planet, some type of event, not just marquee characters coming out. And if we were to ever get a legendary from that time period, I don't think it can be someone like Boss Nass. To me, Boss Nass is very Tusken Chieftain, very Tarful-esque level character, definitely a leader, but not necessarily legendary. It would obviously be Chancellor Palpatine. Now, while Palpatine did take most of his control in Episode 2 and Episode 3, he is still technically the Chancellor in Episode 1, wielding a lot of the power that he has, and he would be able to use either senators that we currently have in game, or we could even add more, such as Bail Organa later down the line, to help fill out his team, because he's the only character that I can really think of that really fits the legendary mantra more so than, say, Jar Jar or Boss Nass or Queen Amidala, having that really high ranking role. And another thing that I would like to see, and they don't have to necessarily go this direction, would be an added Maul rework to work alongside him. I know it seems a little weird to have kind of a Galactic Republic / Senate kid work alongside Darth Maul, but that's really exactly what was happening during that first movie. Darth Maul was definitely going out and doing a lot of Palpatine's dirty work, while he was working very much on the front lines within the Senate, trying to take control of everything there. So there could be some give and take between the two, where, you know, every time that Maul is hindered or hurt, or he's taking the brunt of everything, Palpatine and really the rest of the Senate is gaining traction. They're being able to show that the enemy is more capable, so the more damage he takes, or the stronger he gets, in turn, the Galactic Republic or the Senate faction has to get even more stronger to be able to overcome him, kind of playing both sides, which, you know, was his whole thing the entire time. Obviously, that would take a little bit more work, as we would need more senators to fill out the team, unless we're just planning on stealing Jar Jar, Padme, as well as Mon Mothma, just to fill it out immediately. Now, another thing that they could do in addition to these characters, and I realize we're technically going to come up short character-wise here at the 15 number, but I would really love to see the N1 Starfighter. Very specifically the one we got in Phantom Menace. I am really not against the version we got in The Mandalorian. I would love to have that too later down the line, but to me, this is just such an iconic ship of very cool builds. Obviously, it would just get thrown into our current Galactic Republic fleets. There's not really nearly enough in game right now to be able to mount a full Naboo fleet. And I mean, even if they wanted to bring in enough ships into the game, I'm not even sure what else we would get. I guess like Padme had a ship, we had this ship, but it's not like, I don't think the Gungans would be able to take all of their flyers into space, or at least not very well. But either way, I would like to see this in game, even if it is kind of a nesting doll for later ships, but just something in the game that could help boost Mace up a little bit, because Marauder seems to like Negotiator an awful lot. So that is going to be our video today, focusing on what Phantom Menace characters could come into the game. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know who we missed, and as always, stay awesome.